Okay. So in OCD treatment, we talked a lot about like values-based living, but also how fears come out of the things that we value. And I kind of put two and two together that the reason why I stopped posting videos wasn't only just because like at the time like queer artists and creators were being censored on all sorts of platforms. It still happens like on social media, but not as much on YouTube now. And at the time that was very upsetting, and like all sorts of reasons in life and like things taking too long. But I feel like at the core of it was also because I am afraid to talk. And my fear of posting videos is a sign to me that I care about it, and I know I do because I always come back being like, oh, I wish I kept posting videos. I wish I just stuck with it. I wish I did this and that, and like, oh, that would be a great YouTube video. But
then River, why didn't you post?
well, that's because there's a lot of reasons why, and I think it's very interesting because I feel like some of you might be able to relate to this, and even if you don't, I will tell you the story from the beginning. And I'll tell you exactly why this video is titled the way that it's titled. I've always been interested in video creation. So even before YouTube, my dad, he is an animator, and he allowed my sibling and I to make these like silly little videos with our toys. So we had these like little resin animals and stuff, and we would come up with storylines, and we just would film like movies, and we would make my dad film them. And I saw him editing them, and I was like,
I want to learn how to do that.
so I learned how to use Adobe Premiere as a literal child because he already had it because he's an animator, and I loved it. That was what I loved to do for fun. I would like force poor Blake to dress up with me and do like ridiculous skits or just like absolute weird goofy stuff. And in high school, that was when I felt like YouTube took off as more of like, oh, that's when there's YouTubers. It wasn't just like a place where viral funny cat videos were anymore. And I posted a few things, and I even like I had my own YouTube channel. I had posted different things in them. I always had this drive like, oh, I really want to, but something was just holding me back and holding me back. I started to notice this pattern where I had like this feeling where like, oh, like I don't know if I want to talk to anybody. And I even made this channel. I was talking about chronic illness. I had a catheter in my chest and everything. Watching those videos back now is really interesting because I can literally tell I'm like preventing myself from talking normally. Like I was talking higher and quieter and all this stuff, which are things that I still do. And it's like I realized it was a protective response, but I didn't know why exactly. Until I realized I was having dysphoria. This is where it switches into the afraid to talk segment. I realized that it wasn't just a lifetime of dysphoria. I also had medical trauma that was preventing me from seeing that it was okay to talk. Because when you are in medical settings and something is like,
oh, we need to treat you so that you stay okay.
like you stay safe and healthy or alive, you don't get much choice about what they do to you, what you want in general. If it's okay for them to do things, it's like you do the test. You do whatever they say. You don't have a choice. So I was like, okay, I'll just put up with it and push through it. And that became my mode of, like, I realized it was the most extreme of my safety behaviors of becoming silent. And that's why I like writing characters like that. The characters that I write have very different lives than I do. But now that can look back on these instances and it wasn't just like vocal dysphoria, it was also like other medical and relationship or other types of things going on that just taught me again and again and again, like you need to be silent. OCD and PTSD love to tag team, and that was something they jumped on because what happens when you're silent? There's less of a chance you might hurt someone's feelings. There's less of a chance you might say the wrong thing and make somebody hurt you. There's less of a chance that you will cause problems in general, and that's something that I've never liked. And my intrusive thoughts center around things like that, about harm, from like, I don't want to cause harm, and I also don't want harm done to me, and that's, yeah. And yet I still have this drive. I have so much like care about speaking up about things that I care about. Like, I want to advocate for people and for things that I believe in. And I also just get a lot of enjoyment out of entertaining you or anyone that I meet. It's something that's really fun for me, like during live events, and I love doing live streams. And I am a storyteller, of course, so this is something I really enjoy. So that's where I feel like the connection really comes into play for me once I started thinking more about like things I value, because this is something I value. And OCD treatment discusses how fears are usually centered all around things that you care about most. And because I really care about people and I care about advocating, I get afraid of making mistakes. But going back to the time when I was in high school, and then when I created the other YouTube channel about chronic illness, I stopped posting there, primarily because I feel like I almost died. I don't know, like, because Lyme disease is very controversial in terms of like its history and like the corporate aspects of it, to where it becomes very hard to get treatment, it become very hard to be believed and to even get tested. And then once you're tested, it's like you're fucked, basically. You don't get help, basically. And you kind of get pigeonholed into like, this is the treatment at the time, and none of it really ever is like dedicated to Lyme. It doesn't work that way, at least when I was treating it. So I was not doing well. I definitely felt like I almost lost my life multiple times. And then because I already had that programmed in my brain, I just got more and more quiet. And I got to the point where I was bedridden for a long time, but writing stories brought me back to life. And it really is because I value it so much and value storytelling, and the thought of that, like, if I could write something that helps someone else, at least I helped someone else. Like, even if I'm struggling right now. Before we get any farther, I want to tell you, because a lot of these topics relate to my next book coming out, which is Freeing My Alpha. I don't have the final copy yet, I'm waiting for it to arrive, but it's currently like very close to being ready for pre-orders. You will see it within this next week. I'm super excited to show you. Freeing My Alpha is book 2 of My Shy Alpha series, and the main character has OCD and PTSD, and she is working through trying to navigate a relationship, like a true love relationship, for the first time after experiencing an abusive one. Here, I will show you this is the cover. I printed it out. Noah right here, our shy alpha, he also has similarly silenced himself in ways. I'm not saying I'm him. I love to put that disclaimer because people love to say that, but I can relate to him in that way, and because it is a PTSD symptom, and it's a very common one. So if you can relate to that because of trauma, then I totally hear you. I hear where you're at. And you might relate to my characters, but just to warn you, this is a very steamy romance novel, which a lot of people think is a good thing, but if you're under 18, this is not a book for you. Okay, I had this horror comic that I made and I have been thinking about for a long time, and that was called Chronic Nightmare Syndrome. It was kind of based on like how I had really bad nightmares and things, which I later realized was a PTSD symptom. And then once I started doing that, it was like every day I would wake up while I was bedridden and on oxygen and everything. I would wake up and be like, this is what I'm doing. I have a purpose now, and it helped me focus and get through to the next day and the next. While I was doing one of the weird treatments for Lyme disease, I randomly had the whole plot line of What Sexual plop into my head, and I realized then like, oh, I can relate to this. Like, oh no, I am transgender. And then, but what was great about posting those things online is that it was an outlet to speak without speaking. And I find that super interesting because I still found a way to tell stories and to talk without like talking directly. I'm writing about characters that are not me. They haven't experienced the same thing as me, and I can write better than I can talk, even while I'm having a trauma response, which I find really interesting. Maybe it's a different part of my brain, or maybe I'm less worried about filtering things or what others will think because I have time to edit it or something. Especially with vocal dysphoria, I definitely had that really bad. I mean, I still do. Like, I always think when I'm gonna edit my videos that I sound different than I do, and then I hear myself, I'm like, oh, that's not that bad. But I do worry that like showing any vulnerability will make me targetable, and I've drilled out a lot of things from my expression that will make people realize something is wrong, because I've learned for a long time that people are not comfortable with illness or with discomfort, ironically, of others, like others feeling uncomfortable. I wrote these stories that did have trauma in them because I still saw a need for it as someone who enjoyed stories that got into like the nitty-gritty details of like how it is to process. Fast forwarding quite a few years after I had transitioned, like gone to college, I had to leave it because they were not accommodating of my disability. And it was hard to feel like I couldn't speak up about that there too. I went home to my parents' house, moved back in, and I transformed Chronic Nightmare Syndrome, my first comic, into Soul Survivors, which is a thriller series. I realized that I really like the speed of writing in particular, because with comics I can draw quickly. Like, I taught myself through just sitting down and doing it for years. But writing, I can write a lot and fast. And I feel like I lose some of that filter, so I can push myself to say things I would never want to talk about otherwise, because I have too many things, like, I just like feel like I'm hitting a wall of like, nope, this is too, like, it's unsafe basically. So because of that, I started purposefully writing to help myself process trauma. Even if it wasn't about me, it was about characters, it was still helping me process because I was getting to speak through my writing without talking about myself. It was extremely effective for me because it helped me feel less alone, and that was my original purpose for writing Chronic Nightmare Syndrome in the first place, who I could like distantly relate to or relate to in ways that no one else knows or understands. It was funny because like I felt like, oh, I feel less alone because I see these characters as if I didn't create them. But I feel like that's what's cool about fiction, because then when I would post it or talk about it, you all would be like, I do relate to this, and it's true. I really wasn't as alone as I thought in these things. And it really helped me develop a clearer purpose. So it wasn't just that I want to give people entertainment anymore, it was that I could actually help others feel less alone by speaking. And by this time, it was around 2021. The problem was that I was still afraid. I tried to make a video that you saw possibly that was like, I'm back, YouTube, and I talked about some of the things that I had struggled with, but I was still just kept hitting a wall, feeling like it wasn't okay for me. I wasn't allowed. I needed some type of permission, or I was a bother somehow, and I realized that these types of thoughts were consuming my whole life. And eventually I was like, okay, I realized that OCD now, in like, I think especially late 2021 and early 2022, I was like, I didn't know that OCD was more than some, like, because I thought my contamination OCD and a couple other like just right OCD was it. And then I realized like, oh my god, there's harm OCD. I really, really relate to that. I just sought out treatment. Of course, I was diagnosed with it. I learned about how fears attack your values, and intrusive thoughts are egostonic, and they usually show like it's like opposite day. So if I'm afraid of something, like of accidentally stabbing someone. Because that's like a common OCD fear. If I'm afraid of that and then my brain's gonna be like, send me intrusive thoughts of that happening, it gets really confusing for people because you'll think like,
Oh my god, am I this terrible person that wants to do that?
and you're like horrified and scared. Yeah, that's literally a sign that you don't want to do that, because it is ego dystonic, which means it goes against your values. And when I was doing this OCD treatment, as somebody who used to love making videos, loved making YouTube videos, loved live streaming, I was terrified of doing support groups, because now instead of telling stories about funny things or about interesting things or about other people's stories, I had to tell stories about myself. I would literally be shaking and wobbly and like feel like I had low blood sugar every time I would do these support groups, and they weren't even in person, they were over video. As I did more OCD treatment, which is, I did exposure and response prevention therapy, I put the connection together, like especially learning about prolonged exposure for PTSD, that I had been doing my own form of exposure therapy through writing for years, and that's why it was so healing and effective for me. Through learning about all that, I realized like that my fears might never go away. Like, I'm still going to care about the things that I care about, which means I might still be afraid of the things I'm afraid about. It's just that I am slowly learning the tools on how to manage that and be okay with feeling afraid. How I respond to them can change, and it has. So I pushed myself to start filming more reels again about my books, about My Shy Alpha, and Unraveling with You, and all these things. This is in 2023 now, and I quickly realized that they were still my favorite thing, and I really missed posting on YouTube. So now I want to do the ultimate exposure. Filming myself has never been more vulnerable because I am more open than I ever have been. Even like when I was posting my secrets I'm done keeping videos, like I was trying to push myself to talk because I knew it mattered to me, but I couldn't. And that's okay, you know, I still have a lot to open up about, and I might never open up about certain things, but I still want to make an effort because I know how much it matters, not only to me, but to you all. And exposure and response prevention therapy taught me that I kind of love challenging myself and making myself uncomfortable. It kind of feels like when I'm doing something that's like against my rules, like such as post something with a typo, like even if I'm an author and that might seem embarrassing, or like actually talk about things like, oh no, someone on YouTube might judge me. It feels like I'm doing something a little bit devious, like in a fun way and mischievous, I guess. So I mean, it might seem really silly to you, but after all the things I've witnessed and experienced, like, and to the point where, like, when I was bedridden, I was saying absolutely nothing most of those years. It's kind of a big deal. But most of all, I'm dying to connect with all of you again. I just remember how many times that I just thought it was so fun to post something and see your comments come in and you'd be entertained by that. And I felt really sad for a long time about how I wasn't still posting and that I probably disappointed people. And ironically, that made me post less because I was like,
Oh my god, what if I stop posting again and I disappoint everyone again?
well, newsflash, that's what happened. I'm concerned that I might not seem like trustworthy as a creator, as in like you might not expect me to come back even if I've filmed all these videos now, which I have as a buffer to have like a proper schedule again. But I still want to try, and I might have to make another YouTube channel because I learned about the algorithm and my channel might be dead. It might not send my videos to you anymore just because I haven't posted, and because when I did after a while, some of you might not have been online anymore, so YouTube thinks like, oh, no one's interested, and which is not your fault, it's YouTube's fault. It's not my fault in that aspect, other than that I wasn't posting, which is my fault. I also understand and needed that process, this process, to get through all of that in order to learn the things I have and see what matters to me most. But I don't expect to have earned your like consistent viewership or trust back in that way that I'm as a like, oh yeah, River's a consistent creator. Like, I know I haven't been. I still want to share more in case you could relate. Like, sometimes I'll watch things and people will probably have no idea how much that I could relate to it, and that it made me feel less alone in that moment and more hopeful about the world. And that, like, if I could help someone feel that way, even if it's just something silly or small, that matters so much to me. Like, that is what I feel like is my driving force in life. So my main takeaway is, like, even if I messed up before, there's always now to move forward and follow what I believe in. I mean, it's literally the core of every story I write, to talk about difficult things so that others can also share that, like, togetherness and feeling of like empathizing. So after you listen to all of this, I'm very curious, is there something that you are afraid of that you like to strive towards? I feel like this is probably something that more people relate to also than I think, but if you want to share any challenges, of course, don't worry about it if you're not comfortable. But I would love to hear your thoughts on that, and if you can relate in those ways, down in the comments below. And for me, I am deciding to continually challenge my fears right now. All of this led me to the conclusion that you're reading in the title, which is my fear of posting videos makes me want to post them even more, like more than ever. Specifically because it terrifies me. That is currently my challenge. I want to try to see where this takes me. Even if it's on this channel, if I have to make a new channel, I want to try to be consistent and push myself but not force myself. That is also where I noticed that I would struggle, like with talking, is when it felt forced. And I might need more breaks than the average content creator because I still have chronic illnesses and other things, like I'm still treating for PTSD. I might need little gaps between posting sometimes, even if I do come up with a consistent schedule. But for right now, I have scheduled enough videos to be posting every Saturday at least the next month. So I'm very excited to share those with you. I think I have even more filmed, but I still need to edit them. And I'm so grateful to all of those who've continually come back to attend my live streams, because even if I haven't been posting videos, I've been doing live streams at least once or twice a year here. It's so much fun to see familiar old usernames and to catch up with you again on those streams. But more importantly, it just means a lot to me that you still come back to support after all those years and to watch. I really can't tell you how much that means to me, especially because this is something that I care about and that I enjoy doing. I will keep you all updated on my assessment, like if I think we need to restart the channel just due to the algorithm, and I don't want to lose any viewers, but if I do, I will be posting on the community tab, and I'll post a video to make sure that you're totally in the loop. And even then, I might keep this as a second backup channel to post vlogs and things that are like longer and not everyone might be interested in. But I'm very excited to be seeing you for my next video. So I will see you again next Saturday, and I hope that you are having a great day. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way through. I will see you then. Goodbye.